Welcome to the Agile podcast, and I'm your host Shailendra Malik, bringing you the only podcast coming from the red hot dot Singapore, which covers agile methodologies and business agility as a whole. You can find us on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Breakers, and Pocket Casts. Look for the Agile podcast, and here we start with our new episode. So, hello and welcome to another episode for the Agile podcast. I have with me Michael Koh. I have a privilege of working with Michael for past couple of years, and he's one of the SMEs as well as one of the experts coming from the Agile community to share his knowledge with us. Welcome, Michael. Good to have you on the
Hi,
podcast.
Shailendra.
Hey,
Yeah,
good to
thanks
have
for
you on
having
the
me here.
podcast, and let's dive right into it. I would love our audience to know more about you and your background, and what you have been
Yeah,
working.
sure. Yep. Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shao. So thanks for having me here. My name is Michael, and I'm currently an Agile coach with DBS. So that's where I met Shailendra, who is my trench buddy, so to speak, right? As we walk through, journey through some of the challenges and transformation work that we have in the bank itself. So I've been working on transformation agenda for more than 17 years now. So I started off, in fact, I started off as a what we call as entrepreneur in those days. So I started off with, I had my little startup in the media industry, but back about 3 years down the road, had it sold, and then I joined HP. So that was where a lot of where I learned the most about transformation, right? So and that spent about 15 years there, and finally to the bank itself. So in that journey itself, we have done a couple of transformation initiatives, such as in those days it was business process outsourcing, right, and sales transformation. And so during that time, Agile wasn't really that prominent. So we were very much in a waterfall fashion. But one thing that I learned from HP then was some of the garage rules, which you can probably search online, had been very, very useful. And the thought behind that has been very agile if you look at it. So things like how do you work with as a team, and when do you work by yourself, right? And how do you deliver value across to the customers? So all these are becoming very, very crucial these days, especially the time that we are at right now, right? The COVID situation and what have we. So and yeah, so that's a little bit of my background.
Perfect.
Now,
So coming
yep.
from HP then to a bank, I'm sure there would be a big cultural difference, and because vendors or IT organizations take agile as well as transformation in a very different way, and when banks and other organizations they step into transformation space, for them it's slightly different. So how has been your
Yes.
experience seeing the two sectors now, and what does transformation mean in both sides?
I guess on that note, transformation is pretty much prevalent everywhere. So it may present itself differently, right, in different industries. But if you look into the core of that, right, the challenges remain pretty much similar. So yeah, so because if you look at that, at the end of the day, it's all about human interaction, right? So how do we collaborate with one another, right? How do we work, and at the end of the day, it's about delivering a value to the customers. So whether you're in a tech industry or in a financial industry, it's all about creating the value, the customer experience to our end customers. So that's pretty much the same. And of course, to layer that, there will always be the macro challenges that we have, right? So, for instance, like right now, the COVID situation, right? These are all the headwinds that we have, and how do we look at what we have, right? How do we adapt to the new changes, and how do we accelerate with all that we strive to do? compete and to stay ahead and deliver value.
That's very true. So, um, coming to the agile segment, there are a lot of agile purists in the market, and agile has been
Yep,
kind of a rallying cry for many of these organizations and these individuals who talk about
sure.
following the processes, following the cadence, following everything by the book. And I feel that that focus sometimes becomes too process oriented rather than delivery oriented, which agile was supposed to be.
Yes.
uh, I know we have exchanged some notes on this, and then we have our views on this, and then a lot of them converge with each other. But I want our audience to know your view of it, that how agile as a community is being structured, and what new things you are seeing there evolving.
Yep. So there's a very interesting topic there. So I remember, when I was a kid, I used to keep fish, right? So I don't know whether you have done it too as a hobby, right? And when I was first introduced to the fish tank, the fish as a hobby, right? The whole aquarium setup. The first time when I changed the water, as we know, every couple of weeks, right? The water will turn murky. We need to change the water. So what I've done was I simply pour out all the water in the tank when I fill it up with fresh water. So the assumption there is that with fresh water, right, my job is done. So I've cleaned the tank, right? And lo and behold, right, even though the water was fresh and clean, right, all my fish died apparently, and that was quite saddening for a kid, right? Because I was just wondering, I've done all the right things. I've introduced uh, fresh water, right? The tank is clean now, but why did the fish die? So later they realized that this is called a new tank syndrome, right? This is when we, or myself, right, change all the water, and there are there are some good bacteria in the water that enable the fish to thrive, right? And because I've changed it entirely, right, it it affected the fish health, right? They could not adjust to the new environment, therefore they died. So I guess in a similar fashion is that many times in corporations today, there will be a lot of agile practitioners who preach and advocate about being pure agile. So sometimes, many of us would agree with the theories, the principles behind that. But when we become very dogmatic, right, about pushing, hey, you should do this and not do that, we become legalistic, right? And many times we see people suffering from agile, so to speak, right? So we right so and then you see repercussion of agile is not good, and we have a lot of argument debates around that. So I guess in a similar fashion, is it I guess Shao, you can chime in here as well, is how do we being agilist be agile about driving that whole transformation, bearing in mind the core of that is really to deliver a value, right, to the customers, right? It's about customer centricity, right? But if we were to be so pedantic and so dogmatic about driving agile principles and practices, so much so that we disregard the collaboration, right, the interaction, and more importantly, sometimes we may just forget or ignore the cultural aspect of how the environment is set up. Right, these are all, I call this as vital signs. Right, so these are things that we need to watch out for as we roll out agile. How can we be nimble, right, to roll out the whole agile delivery?
That's a very
Does
amazing
this resonate with
analogy.
you? Yeah.
It does, and then the fish tank
Yeah. Yeah.
analogy is one of the amazing analogies I've come across. I haven't heard it that way before,
Oh yeah.
but it fits very well the way you have explained it. So yes, I'm coming from so personally also.
my association with Agile is not too long. It's only 6 years in my career of roughly around 17 years, same as yours. But I come from the traditional project management background as well, and I'm a PMP certified before I jumped into the Agile space. So uh, there is merit and there are good practices which are there in the traditional project management as well. And we should
For
carry
sure.
those
Yeah.
gold nuggets forward rather than just discard the old practices just by saying that, oh, everything in the waterfall or everything in the old practices was not good. The entire focus was to give more weightage to what was highlighted in the Agile Manifesto, which is communication or the interpersonal interactions over processes, and then having an interpersonal relationship going on rather than just
Yep.
having the formal documentation, all that stuff. So the whole intention was making the entire system more human than just a robotic set of
Spot on.
processes.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so when we
Spot
say
on.
today that the old processes or the old way of working is not good, I feel that we are kind of diluting as well as discarding a good body of knowledge that took 50 years to build itself, and we are just discarding it for the name of Agile, and then that
Yeah,
saddens
for
me
sure.
quite a bit as well. So
Yeah,
yes,
I guess so I definitely agree with you. So to me, I think there are three. In fact, there are three basic tenets of agile. The way I see it, right? One is what you just said earlier, is being human, right? I guess there are always today we call agile as a new way of working, right? We hear this at many places. The funny thing is that is if we look into the principles and values, even at the manifesto, we realize that hey, these are things that are not new. These are things that I already know, and these are all the good things I definitely agree. But in our day-to-day interaction, in our delivery, many times we forgot about that. So what I like to say about that is that agile is not a new way of working. It is in fact a way of living that we have forgotten, right? So sometimes, right, it is good that we have this manifesto and this whole framework in place as a mindset, right, to govern, to remind us that it is not about documentation, for instance, right? It's not about following through the process, even though it's important, but it's also to have more regards on who we are dealing with, right, as a person. So I think on that note, being human is fundamental. So it's about having the respect for diversity and culture, and this is all the more important in the environment that we are in today. And the second tenet which I thought would be crucial um, would be going digital. Look, in order for us to be nimble, right, automation has its place. So that helps to accelerate the value to the market, right? And I think even so, if from an agile perspective, is that um, if we look at the COVID situation, right? For many years before that, we have been many companies have been advocating digital transformation. And I guess the hardest was for the small and medium enterprises. So they already have established a way of working for themselves, right? Many of the work that they have are analog, right? Many of the things that they do, which is good, is on face-to-face engagement and delivery. But when COVID situation hit, right, many of them were taken aback. So they have to start pivoting, right? I think in this landscape today, all the more it is important for enterprises, for anyone, right, to have a digital plan, a digital transformation plan, right? I've seen for many small businesses how they have pivoted, and that's very interesting. For example, um, before that, karaoke, right? Many of us would have gone to with friends for karaoke sessions, right? So you need to commingle, you need to be in a small room, and that room is really in the COVID situation,
it's
somewhere we
taboo
wouldn't
now.
want to be. Yeah, yeah. So and that business really took a hit, Now I've seen in some countries, I think if I remember correctly, it was probably from Taiwan, right? They have launched a digital app for karaoke. That was very innovative, I must say, because now anyone can log on using the app and sing. And there's a very vibrant, lively community of users from various countries. So it has extended not just within the shore of Taiwan, but to many countries such as Hong Kong and even in Australia. Right, so you see many of them logging in into what they call as a private virtual rooms, and they have a point system. It's sort of like gamification. You sing, you hit a tune, you get some points. People can give you flowers and so on and so forth. So you can see how a business that was very conventional then, right, has changed with a digital platform like this. So I think in many facets there's room for innovation for companies to embark on a digital plan. Right, never easy, but it's all in the spirit of experimentation. Right, how do we go ahead and do that? Most I think is the case in point here is for survival.
True.
Right, today's world, if you do not have a digital plan, right, then the survival of the business is at risk.
That's very true.
The last point which I believe is extremely crucial is customer centricity. Now, in many strategies and approaches that we have seen today, right, we have talked extensively on customer centricity. So it's nothing new, but it's about how do we connect our value, the way the supply to the demand, right? How do we identify the value stream to our end customers? So I've started my business I've shared earlier, right? And one of the learnings from there is really how do I connect what I aspire to do, what I want to do, what I conjure in my mind as a value to what is really required by my customers. So many times in a very fixed mindset, right, I think of something, right, and I thought that must be the best solution that I have, only to be rolled out and to be rejected by the customers because that's not what they want. So the key point here is how then, in a very agile spirit, how then do we iterate, inspect, and adapt to what the customers want, and it's calls for continuous feedback loop with them. So yeah, so I think the whole point of driving customer centricity is all the more crucial today. Right, we see big companies like say Netflix, for instance, a very classic example. Right, in the past we used to rent videotapes, VCRs, VCDs, right, and we go to the shop and lo and behold, we watch that. We have passed the deadline. You have to pay a late fee, right? But today we don't have to do that anymore, right? And it's not because Netflix has a very powerful network. They do, right? Of course, but that's not the key value. The key value here is that they have rightly identified the angst of the customers, a gap in the market, right? That that they can penetrate, right? That is the late fees. If we do not need to pay a late fees, right, and everything is at our hand, right, just by the click of the app, right, and we can select the movies that we want or at our fingertip, right. That saves the customers a lot of inconveniences. I think that is a true value of how Netflix has delivered to the market. They have listened to the customers. They have listened to the voices of the customers. Yeah, and again, back to what we are discussing here, I guess in many different areas of business, right? We need to understand what the customers really want. So there you have it, Shao. Yep.
Yeah, I was coming back to the same point that so COVID has introduced a lot of new dynamics. You already covered how karaoke industry has been taken an innovative space there, and how Netflix in general, not because of COVID, but in general, they have They have created more value by identifying the pain and trying to solve a problem there. What do you feel COVID has triggered, and how the agile community and as well as the projects that we run today, they will evolve with the current COVID situation? What do you feel is right there in the horizon in front of us?
But I guess the COVID situation has pressed the alarm bell for change for many companies. Right, jobs are displaced. Skill sets need to be rejuvenated. We need to think in a different way of how we, being the business owners, right, deliver the value to our customers, right? And in the past, again, we have thought extensively about having a digital plan, especially to the SMEs, automation, having a digital presence, right? Well and good. I give you an example of a business that I used to do. So it was in IoT. So if you know about IoT in the agricultural scene, is that we do have the sensors to detect, say, the wetness of the leaves, the soil quality, and so on and so forth. Right. It was a tough sell to the farmers. Why? Because they already have the existing tools, which are good and serving them very, very well. Right. But there isn't a need for them to have it digitized. Why do they need that? But if you look at it from a digital point of view, is that with digitization, we could provide predictability, and we can also scale it across a bigger space than they have. So we can really look at the insights to drive the business.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess to that point is that in the past, without a disruption, right, such as COVID situation, there isn't a need for us to think digitally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with this push, right, which is not by choice, we start to think differently, and we start to adopt a digital plan. And this is where we can see how this digital transformation can really help to increase your yield and increase your reach to your customers. Yep. So that's what I find that is all the more crucial right now with the setting, the landscape that we have today. Right. Though a crisis itself is an opportunity.
True, true. Well, I'm just amazed by the examples that you have taken and the insights that you have not just from the tech sector but on the alternate sectors as well. And that's the cross pollination that you bring to the table, which I love with you working with you. So it was a very informative session. Thank you so much for sharing it, and I'm sure the audiences of the Agile podcast would love this session and ask for more. So we'll definitely plan another session and another discussion with you soon.
Thank you, Shao. Really appreciate your time too. So thanks for having me here.